It was 30 years ago last month at Bash at the Beach when the New World Organization of Wrestling first formed. Hulk Hogan doing the unthinkable, turning heel and joining forces with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. It was the biggest twist that wrestling fans had seen in forever, but how would WCW capitalize after the initial shock wore off? We're going to find out as I look at the inaugural HOG WILD pay-per-view from August 10th, 1996 at the 56th annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in Sturgis, South Dakota. This show was nominated by Matthew Thomas, Alan Jolly, Andrew Farrell, Jesse Alvarez, John Hogan, Nick Brown, and Alan Skinner over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. At this point, the nWo was in the throes of their hostile takeover of WCW, with the basic underlying premise of tradition sucks, brother. We want to put bed sheets over the giant letters at MGM Disney, and we're going to air some cool-ass black and white promos at 15 frames per second, and it's going to change the wrestling business as we know it, brother. And the build to this, of course, features that incredible episode of Monday Nitro that took place at the Disney MGM Grand Studios when the Outsiders jumped members of the locker room in the middle of the show, and everything just grinds to a halt as the EMTs and the staff are in the back checking on all the wrestlers who got beat up and injured. The famous moment of Rey Mysterio getting thrown like a lawn dart into the trailer by Kevin Nash. Woman sobbing over Arn Anderson as he's been knocked down, and all this just commotion and chaos. And again, it always bears repeating just how completely revolutionary this was. No wrestling show was abandoning the formula like this to this kind of degree, and again, really showing the blurred lines, making the nWo storyline. This is what really made it so compelling for the time, and getting to watch this back in real time for research when I didn't get to watch this as it happened. It's been really cool to get kind of a week by week, blow by blow kind of recap of how it really molded and took shape. This was the first ever WCW event at Sturgis, but far from the last. Eric Bischoff loved his motorcycles, and of course he wanted to impress all his cool wrestler friends. Therefore, they did a big bike run from the Mall of America to Sturgis for the rally, and here we are for this pay-per-view. And of course, they would return to Sturgis for the next several years for what would become Road Wild. It's a beautiful evening in Sturgis, nothing but clear skies and sunshine, a high of 88 degrees. You got that biker crowd. They've been ripped since they woke up at 11 a.m. and they are revving their resplendent hogs all evening. I gotta admit, seeing all the B-roll of Sturgis throughout this show and also looking at the crowd in general, like during this event, I got some big Gathering of the Juggalos vibes. Like, this is a very similar kind of event in terms of like what the kind of like audience it brings from people all over the world, and there's all this fun, crazy stuff you can do in the sweltering heat for a week, and it just brings all sorts of people together. And I just love this aesthetic. I'm a huge fan of outdoor venues and unique settings for wrestling shows, and I always appreciated WCW, how around this time they were never afraid to spice things up. Which kind of reminds me of this week's sponsor. Time to talk about Cook Unity, a chef-to-you meal delivery platform that connects you with hundreds of fresh, fully prepped meals from award-winning chefs made in local kitchens and sent right to your door. I've talked recently about my experience with Cook Unity and how much I enjoy it. I've talked about how easy it is to select their meals to suit any taste or any diet, how easy it is to pop them in the microwave for a couple of minutes to get a complete and balanced meal. But what I love most about Cook Unity is just the variety and the flavors. So many different options to choose from, each with delicious flavor profiles I would never think to do while cooking on my own. The Creole spaghetti with andouille sausage is one of my new faves, along with the Chipotle lime shrimp bowl and the South Indian chicken farufal. The different flavors are amazing. It's like I'm being transported to prime WCW in 96 and 97. Something for every taste. Support the channel and give Cook Unity a chance. They're offering my viewers 50% off their first order right now. Click the link in the description and use my code REGRET50 to try it out. Thanks everybody, now back to the video. I love that red and yellow Hulk is still all over the marketing for this show, and the fact that even in hindsight, even after knowing what happened at Bash at the Beach, and even with the time perhaps for Turner Home Entertainment to make a new VHS cover to reflect Hogan's new dark persona. Nope, never crossed their minds. Like, what a missed opportunity that could have been for like an image of, you know, black and white Hogan spray painting and defacing all over like the good guy Hogan and the red and yellow bike. Again, more of the bucking of tradition. It always makes me laugh thinking about it. Speaking of which, I loved the further blurring of the lines here because in the run-up to this show, they had a live version of Saturday Night from Sturgis. So for 2 hours, you had kind of a pre-show with loads of undercard matches and promos to hype the event, including a promo from the nWo near the end. And so the first thing you see on the WCW pay-per-view is this big disclaimer page saying the views and opinions of the nWo do not reflect those of WCW, a Turner company. I thought that was great. Then after a hype package featuring some blatant ripoff of Right Now by Van Halen, we hear this like sputtering of a motorcycle engine starting up, and then we go the cross dissolve to see the big rolling black hills of Sturgis and the huge crowd surrounding the ring. The show got 220,000 pay-per-view buys, which is a pretty good retention from the 250,000 that Bash at the Beach got the previous month. And also because up until this point, WCW did not have an August pay-per-view. That's pretty good bonus numbers. I love these big sweeping chopper shots to show the whole crowd as well. You got Tony Schiavone, Dusty Rhodes, and Bobby Heenan on commentary. I love all these respective Sturgis looks for these guys. I mean, Schiavone's look is tremendous. The leather hat, the long hair, and the fake tattoo on his arm is great. Dusty rocking the jean shorts all rolled up and the denim sleeveless shirt. Bobby Heenan looking like both the coolest and the warmest man in the area. And they're talking about the main event, and Dusty mentions how tonight is a night for freedom, but you know, the Giant must conquer the Hulk Hogan syndrome, daddy. And then Bobby Heenan says there's every once in a while you get a gut feeling that something's gonna happen, and he feels the Giant is in deep, deep trouble. And with that, your first free 5 minutes are up before officially going behind the paywall, viewers. So hey, if you want to see something more besides Dusty Rhodes and Daisy Dukes, you gotta fork up the cash. Beginning with a match for the Cruiserweight title as Rey Mysterio Jr. defends against Ultimate/Ultimo Dragon, accompanied by Sonny Ono, who looks very overdressed for this. Also, I love Rey rocking the classic Spider-Man look. Takes me right back to, 7th grade and seeing that look on World Tour. Mike Tenay joins the lads on commentary for this one to provide the context. Heenan in this matchup spends most of his time insisting that both participants are ugly because they wear masks. Starting out with some quick back and forth, there's a USA chant at one point for Rey, I suppose. I mean, he's from San Jose, but I'm not sure the crowd can make the distinction. I'm also not sure if this crowd knows how to react when wrestling is presented to them. Now, I know there had been some matches leading up to this on Saturday night, but it just feels like they're not really reacting for all of the moments you would expect, like high spots, at big moments in the matchup. There's a lot of times in this show where the crowd really seems tuned out to it. But I mean, they do understand the basics of they want to cheer, they want to boo somebody. So because Ultimo Dragon is with Sonny Ono, the obnoxious manager, they feel compelled to boo Ultimo Dragon, who's not really a heel. Big missile dropkick to the back by Rey as he starts his comeback, planches to the outside onto the dirt. The camera almost misses it. And good Lord, that is also quite a drop. Going past the pedestal, the ring is on. Dragon comes back with a springboard to the outside. Listen to the thud from landing on that platform.
Variation of the drop kick. Oh my God!
Then you see him spending a lot of time just chatting, going over the next spot. Dragon hits that beautiful moonsault into the reverse DDT, still doesn't go for the cover, hits another beautiful moonsault, but Rey still kicks out. Running powerbomb countered, that looked great. Rey goes for the Frankensteiner, Dragon blocks it, Rey just gets back up and hits it again. The cover and the win, Rey retains the title. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars out of 5. I thought this was a pretty good match. I think Ultimo trying to lean in to getting booed and doing heel stuff, I'm not sure it worked. I think it just kind of broke up the flow of their match, but I think this was still a very good athletic way to kick off the pay-per-view proper. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting kind of sign of things to come as far as the audience is concerned. Mean Gene's in his cool Hog Wild vest and white t-shirt and Turner Sports hat, plugging that hotline, and then we go on to a challenge match as Scott Norton takes on Ice Train. Oh yeah, big hoss fight coming up. This is a team that recently broke up, and as I was about to watch this match, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I already cover this matchup when the team had recently broken up? And then I realized, oh no, these guys also fight next month at Fall Brawl, so that was smart of my past self. Ice Train is selling some damage. Earlier on Saturday night, he got in the Giant's face when Giant chokeslammed Teddy Long on Nitro, and that cost him a little bit. These two are throwing bombs at each other from the get-go. Norton starts to go after Ice Train's bandaged shoulder, inside and outside of the ring. And quickly as this match goes on, that tape is just not holding anything up. It's like getting all tangled up in the straps of his singlet, so the singlet now doesn't know if it wants to be up or down. It's kind of weird. He is able to knock Norton down with some big chops though. The Train keeps absorbing shots, busts out a really cool power slam out of nowhere, keeps trying to fight back, but Scott does keep attacking the arm. He puts him down in the arm bar. Ice Train submits and Flash puts a little bit extra on it after the bell. I'm going to give it a 1.5 stars. This one did feel a little lackluster, a little one-dimensional. I think this one could have benefited from either a little bit less time or a bit more variety in the story they were trying to tell. And maybe Ice Train's injury or his selling of it took a little bit out of it for me, especially when the tape was just kind of getting all over the place. Then they play a portion of the Ric Flair interview that aired earlier on Saturday night when he talks about the nWo invasion. He brings up how, he hurt his best friend in Arn Anderson. He had this understanding in his mind that the Horsemen and the nWo could have coexisted, but after that night when Arn got jumped, put it in a whole different ball game. And so he says, that he is going to fight for the honor of WCW. He may not like Luger and Sting, and they may not like him, but, when it comes to it, they're going to fight for the glory of the company. My favorite part of this, though, is at the end when Flair's like, Hogan, if you want the nWo to really make its mark, you've got to beat me. Woo! But yeah, I'm pretty sure Hogan has beaten you. A lot, fairly resolutely over the last 2.5 years. Up next, the Battle of the Bikes. Madusa takes on Bull Nakano with Sonny Ono again in the corner. The loser gets their motorcycle all bashed up. You see Sonny Ono riding out on the crotch rocket in front of his charge in Nakano. Meanwhile, Madusa rolling up in her Harley as Dusty mispronounces the town Sturgis, and him saying it just for some reason temporarily locks my brain up.
Get ready for some fire right here in Sturgis. What did I say? Sturgis.
Bull attacks first with the nunchuck, the nunchuck, the nunchuck.
She got a nunchuck. She got a nunchuck. Bull hit her with a nunchuck.
Madusa takes a lot of heat, but she bridges out of a pinfall attempt and just goes to town with the clotheslines. Bull puts a stop to her, drops her with a draping DDT. Madusa hits another comeback, and at this point, I'm starting to notice the running gag of the night that Bobby Heenan will go to 100 times more as this goes on, where every time there's a near fall, Heenan will just keep going, she got her, or he got him, and no he didn't, no she didn't. And it's like every time there's a kick out. It happens almost every time in this matchup. And at first I thought it was funny, but no, he's gonna keep wringing this one dry throughout the rest of the evening. Both ladies trading big suplexes. We actually get a 3 count as Madusa puts the shoulder up at 2, so it's actually Bull taking the pin, but good luck trying to figure that out at first glance, because in classic form, whenever this happens, nobody knows what is actually going on. But in the immediate moment of Madusa putting the shoulder up, the 3 count, Sonny Ono just gets on the apron. He thinks they've won. He grabs the comically large sledgehammer. He looks to go swinging at the bike, and he's just going, I'm gonna hit it. At one point, he even goes all the way through and just gently taps the padded seat with the sledgehammer. And as he's threatening it, the bell hasn't rung yet. Suddenly it does ring. And I guess Madusa's declared the winner. There's this big, confusing scrap. Madusa grabs the hammer from Sonny, starts to swing away at the Japanese bike. Bull has to pretend that she cares as Madusa keeps hacking away at it. I give it 2 stars out of 5. I liked that, Madusa and Bull went hard at it all match, but this was the wrong place to try a finish that clever. You know, it's already hard enough when the wrestling audience is like into wrestling and understands how a wrestling match works. But that kind of finish where it's like the suplex, the kick out, so the person giving it's actually pinning themselves, like that takes a lot of explanation. And I don't think they did any of that to the live crowd because that's going to be lost on them. But then you have to explain it on the air, and that was also not very well done. It just seemed like there was some kind of colossal fuck up that put a damper on an otherwise like fine match. The Steiner brothers are in the CompuServe zone. How did Scott Steiner not keep that hat for his gimmick after he joined the nWo? Rick also making some weird noises. Sounds like he's doing his impression of Colossus in the X-Men arcade game.
What are they doing? They're not air traffic controllers.
I love at the end when Dusty goes, you know what he's playing? He's playing one of them games. And then there's like 2 beats of silence and Tony just goes, is that what he's doing? Playing one of those games? He has no patience. Coming up next, former Cruiserweight champion Dean Malenko takes on Chris Benoit, accompanied by Woman and Miss Elizabeth. And you know what? Hindsight notwithstanding with Chris and Nancy, I will say that Chris Benoit reminds me a lot of Jeff Jarrett in that being surrounded by beautiful women does his presence and aura no favors. But you also see Jimmy Hart walking out with Dean Malenko and giving him a handshake. Hey baby, if you beat Benoit, you'll get a Cruiserweight title match. Don't ask how that works since we don't fuck with Mysterio, baby. Ha ha! Also, I'm not sure what Dean Malenko is doing on TV for the last several weeks, doing the Dungeon of Doom's bidding when they've got guys like Big Bubba and Braun the Leprechaun. The match starts out with lots of punches and strikes, Malenko and Benoit taking turns in the driver's seat. Great backy-forthy sequence. We get each man doing the bridge-up thing, attempting the backslide. In the middle of this match, apropos of nothing, there's like a sweeping crowd shot, and Heenan just decides to do a blatant like redneck bit.
Look here, honey, I got a beard and an eagle on my back.
Benoit working his way to the diving headbutt to Dino. Malenko reverses a tombstone attempt with one of his own. Really great stuff in this match. They're busting everything out here. Oh shit, Benoit with the Lion Tamer months before Chris Jericho arrives in the company. Or as Heenan calls it on commentary, the Canadian Crippler Crab. It's Canadian Crippler Crab season! And again, this match is wasted on this crowd. These guys are pulling out all the stops, and this crowd is so fucking dead for it. Although I do love how Dusty describes this crowd in the middle of the match where he just calls it a sea of heads, and then they just bounce that term around a lot for the rest of the match. We can hear Dave Penzer start to give time cues over the PA, as by this point Bobby Heenan has completely wrung that he got him kick out joke dry. You know, we get to 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. In the end, we get a time limit draw after 20 minutes. Fans are disappointed in the outcome, they're booing. Then Nick Patrick suddenly declares we get a 5-minute overtime. You know, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. It's wrestling. Benoit gets his own version of the Texas Cloverleaf on Malenko, but he eventually has to release it. The Sea of Heads is looking on as these two warriors continue to push themselves. He then says these two have really gone to the trough on this one, which is a great saying. And then even this one goes to a time limit draw. And then Nick Patrick's like, we're going to give it another extension. And the fans boo that. Like, do you want an outcome or don't you?
5-minute overtime period.
Malenko avoids the drop kick, he locked in the cloverleaf, transitions into the crossface, but Woman gets involved, and in the chaos, Benoit with the roll-up, and he picks up the win. This one gets 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. What a brilliant match this is. I mean, just a great technical classic between these two, and the extra overtimes really adding to it, you know, and the wonky finish aside, it's just, oh man, it's just the way it makes you feel after that kind of battle. It's pretty neat. But again, this is a match that was not booked with this crowd in mind because they did not appreciate it at all. So, you know, Malenko is not able to hold up his end of the bargain, so looks like he won't get that Cruiserweight title match, except he totally does 5 days later at Clash of the Champions. Coming up next for the WCW Tag Team Championship, you got Harlem Heat accompanied by Sister Sherry and Colonel Parker defending against the Steiner brothers. And right out the gate, we got to talk about the crowd. for this matchup, because this is, I think, probably the most animated, the loudest they ever get on this show, is for this moment. Just before they even lock up and do anything, you've got like jaw-jacking with Harlem Heat yelling at the crowd, and you've got the managers as well, and then all of a sudden they start getting yelled at by all the fans, and suddenly everyone starts to rev up their bikes and blare their horns. So you've got all this noise, this screaming, swelling cacophony of sound just bombarding them at this point. It is unlike anything I have ever witnessed for a wrestling show to have all that noise. I cannot imagine what it must have been like to be in the center of that ring. I couldn't help but wonder if the people in the crowd surrounded by all the new fresh exhaust in the air were just getting a little lightheaded as all that screaming was going on. Everyone's having a good time at Sturgis. We finally get some offense. We get the suplexes, clotheslines, poses, barking. There's a great exchange on commentary where Tony says, "Oh, it looks like Colonel Parker's cleaning out his ears." And Dusty goes, "Looks like he had a blowout too." I'm like, oh my God, is this a reference to what I think it's a reference to? Like Fall Brawl when Colonel Parker shit himself? Good Lord, this crowd is electric for everything the Steiners are doing in this matchup. At one point, Booker takes this bump and Dusty says he skinned him alive. He lollipopped him. Now, I do not know, nor do I want to know what it means to lollipop someone. Also, Heenan, during this matchup in particular, every time he opens his mouth, he just goes on about like, do you know what's great about WCW is that we started this show at 6 o'clock and everyone is still here and everyone's still standing. Do you know what's great about WCW? It's that sometimes you just never know who's gonna win. What the hell? Bobby, are you drinking already? Scott hits the big belly to belly at one point to a huge pop. Booker T and Stevie Ray doing a lot of cheap shot work to keep working over Rick. Rick catching Booker, slams him down. Big Brother takes a big tumble on the outside. Do you know what's crazy about WCW? Everyone's wearing black and they're still standing. Booker missing an elbow drop, but he hits the unnamed spinneroonie and the Harlem sidekick. Nice. Rick dodging the knee drop, tagging in Scotty, who's a house of fire. Suddenly Colonel Parker on the apron. He has powder, but he hits the wrong man. But that's okay, because Sherry also has powder and hits the right guy. Then Parker blasts Scott with a cane, cracking it in half. The referee on the outside doing his best to not see any of this. The cover and the win. Harlem Heat retain, and we almost get a riot on our hands. I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. I think as a match itself, the story and the structure were fine. I think the Steiners and Harlem Heat traditionally, historically, have always had great encounters, whether it's tags or singles with Booker and Scott, for instance. But the crowd definitely added the special sauce for this one. They have a recap of the WCW crew riding their Harleys from the Mall of America to Sturgis. Oh, look at Mongo's dog Pepe, it's so cute! There's also a scene where Madusa is sitting behind some old lady who I think might be dead. She's just like sitting frozen in place as Madusa's talking behind her.
WCW rocks, you're gonna kick some butt!
The sun is setting as the show continues on to the U.S. title match as Ric Flair defends against Eddie Guerrero. Eddie's the young up-and-comer, blazing a trail through the ranks of WCW here. He's a fresh-faced, mullet-wearing guy who wants to make a big impression. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Ric Flair put a hurting on Eddie's nephew Chavo on Saturday night, adding some more fuel to the fire here. Flair coming out in the white robe with his lady friends and his red trunks, which, not gonna lie, almost, I thought it was telegraphing the end of this matchup, but I'm gonna watch with an open mind and see what happens. The match begins. Rick shoves, Eddie shoves, the referee even does some shoving, but Guerrero will not be intimidated by the Nature Boy. There's some back and forth. Eddie comes down awkwardly on a slam and Flair grabs his arm in pain. Fun fact, that right there is one of my earliest Botchamania memories. Eddie fires back and is able to send Flair out of the ring. Back inside, the referee gets distracted. Eddie's taken right to Dick Kick City. Guerrero comes back hitting a top rope sunset flip, which seems like a terrible bump to give yourself. He dodges a punch, even puts Flair in his own figure 4. We get a tornado DDT. Eddie's just pulling out all the stops, even pulling down Flair's trunks. And this moment gets like one of the biggest and most sustained sustained pops of the whole night, where Flair's just showing his ass, walking around all four corners. Yeah! Woo! Rev, 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 beep, beep. Yeah, old man ass, woo! Eddie hits the frog splash, but comes down hard on his own knee. Now Flair gets the figure 4 locked in with some assistance from Woman. The shoulders are down, the 3 count, and the win for Flair. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars out of 5. Match is pretty good, and I think the intrigue of seeing these two names on paper against each other with their very different styles, and you wonder how on earth are they gonna make that work, but they did. I thought that was just pretty well executed, although I think it's so interesting to see how other storylines operate at this point in WCW, and how the rest of the company in kayfabe is very much like, head down, business as usual. We're just going to keep doing our normal thing. Flair and Guerrero, totally normal, while this nWo threat is just continuing to loom and getting bigger. You got Mean Gene with Jimmy Hart and WCW champion The Giant, and even for his own standards, Jimmy is dressed pretty ridiculously. Hart warns Hogan not to trip and fall tonight because nobody will be there to pick him up, and Giant says that as a kid, he was the biggest Hulk Hogan fan in the world, but then he told all those kids out there to stick it, so now it will be he, the Giant, who will do the sticking. And he says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, he will make Hogan's eyes pop out and lay him to rest. You understand, I'm a giant. Ah! In this grudge match that follows up from Bash at the Beach, you've got Sting and Lex Luger teaming up to take on Hall and Nash, the Outsiders. And as the nWo have begun to raise hell, Sting and Luger are really some of the guys on the front lines of defense here, as we saw at Bash at the Beach, continuing to carry that on. And as they wait for the elusive 4th member, there's also the limo sitting outside of MGM Studios. At one point, they deliver this this wreath of funeral roses and flowers and stuff. Match begins with Hall and Luger trading offense. Nash tags in with a lot of swagger. He spits right on Sting to get him to tag in. Nash is very strong at first, but the Stinger fights back, pokes Nash in the eye, and picks him up for a slam. The crowd is loving this very simple storytelling. Sting takes a cheap shot from Hall and takes all sorts of heat. So many elbows from Nash. Another clothesline from Hall on the outside. Luger's getting pissed at this point. Shoulder tackle leads to Sting rebounding, headbutting Nash right in the dick. At one point in the match, Heenan is actually starting to cheer on Hall and Nash, which I don't know if it's ever really followed up on or it was intentional, but like immediately the other announcers pounce on, like, whoa, are you nWo, bro? Like, what are you doing praising Hall and Nash or wanting them to win? And I don't know if they were ever going to turn Heenan nWo. I don't think that would have been a great fit for it, but I think that one of the biggest unintentional consequences of the nWo was really defanging Bobby Heenan, because he couldn't heel on the heels and he had to portray like being part of WCW. Sting with some much needed separation, which leads to a hot tag to Lex Luger. He goes nuts on both Outsiders. Sting and Nash are on the outside. Scorpion deathlock to Nash. Luger with the power slam to Hall. He tries to go for the rack, but Nick Patrick is lightly tapped by Hall's foot. Then the Patrick chop. Oh wait, that first one didn't get sold for some reason. Better get it again. The Patrick chop, and this time Luger actually goes down. Patrick counts the 3 and the Outsiders win. What the hell was that? I give it 2 stars out of 5. It's a simple story and it was being told well enough, but they really fucked up that finish. And it was like, I don't know if it was an issue of Nick Patrick going down too early or Lex Luger not going down soon enough, but it just looked kind of shitty at the end, and them trying to cover for it was a bit weird. But this is the beginning of Nick Patrick as the double agent referee who's also working with the nWo. Months of is he or isn't he are about to commence across programming, and to their credit, they do a very good job kind of like making you wonder, well gosh, is he or isn't he? And it does go on for a while, but it's very compelling. It's main event time, a match for the WCW World Title as the Giant defends against Hollywood Hogan. So, as of course we all know from Bash at the Beach, Hulk Hogan is a good guy no more. He dropped the leg on Randy Savage and WCW itself at that event, and he told all the fans they could stick it, that he actually hated the charities and hated the children, and he loved himself. And it truly was the most brilliant piece of business in wrestling. It was one of the biggest subversions you could have at that time. You know, the nWo certainly would not have succeeded if Hogan didn't join it, and conversely, Hogan's career would have fallen off a cliff much sooner, and he probably would have fallen into obscurity if it weren't for the nWo reviving it for him. Michael Buffer with the intros for this one, and I gotta say, it doesn't matter, you know, when or where it is, seeing Hulk Hogan coming out first for any match is always kind of a trip for me. This is also one day before his 43rd birthday, which is so crazy. This is his big birthday weekend, is Hulk Hogan, 43 years old. And I cannot stop thinking about how funny that is here in 2026 to look at like where 43 is like the average age of your wrestling main eventers, it seems, in today's scene on the national picture. And back in 96, we looked at Hulk Hogan at 43 and going, he's so old, he's so decrepit, we gotta get him out of here. This is Hogan's first match as a tried and true heel in well over a decade. You have to go back to the early 1980s when he was in his first run in the WWF, being managed by classy Freddie Blassie, to see the last time Hogan was deliberately trying to get booed. So how would he adapt with a heel style on a night such as this? Well, let's listen to the crowd for an indication, as 5,000 people are chanting for Hogan, Hogan, this dastardly heel, as the match begins. Turns out the bikers in Sturgis did not get the memo, and we get a lot of stalling and powdering by Hogan in the early going. I mean, the total runtime for this matchup is like 15 or 14 minutes, and the first 4 of it is just this, of standing and stalling. Giant does get some offense in, and the crowd does not care. And you know, Hogan is trying. I'll give him credit. He is trying to heel on these fans. He's telling them to shut up, but they don't listen to him. There's a part where he's complaining that the Giant is like pulling his hair, and the crowd's like cheering and agreeing with him, which is nuts. There's a test of strength, which the Giant's winning at first, and there's this big Hogan chant, and there's kids doing it. You can see a bunch of kids jumping up and down, chanting for Hogan. These are the same kids that Hogan told to go fuck themselves last month at Bash at the Beach, and they just don't care. It's incredible. Wow, look at the repertoire for this nasty heel in Hogan, like headlocks and top wrist locks. I will say though, he is at least cackling a lot, and that's pretty evil.
How many people have been able to do that, Dusty? Yeah.
Wow, so much stalling, so many wrist locks. Can we not do anything better or more impactful or interesting than this? How is Hogan getting the Giant this worn down? This is the bad guy. You're supposed to make the champion and the hero of the company look good and strong against the champion. But no, we're not getting that at all. It seems like heel Hogan went to the same school that heel John Cena and the heel Young Bucks went to, because right now, Hogan's whole MO is just be boring, be dull. That's how you're gonna get the crowd to hate you, is to just go in the opposite direction of where wrestling is right now. And I tell you what, that's not a winning long-term strategy. Giant is easily yoinked from the outside. Hogan hits the back rakes, dude. Back in the ring, Giant gets Hogan with a backbreaker, one of the biggest moves of the match so far. Somehow the Giant is now hulking up on Hogan. I don't know why. The crowd's kind of apathetic to it. The big boot, Giant's got it won, but wait, in comes Scott Hall, who's beeled off the top rope. Kevin Nash shows up, grabs Jimmy Hart's megaphone, chokeslam to Hall, chokeslam to Nash, but Hogan lays out the Giant with the megaphone, the cover, and the win. Hogan is now once again the WCW champion. The nWo has tragically completed their hostile takeover mission, to the raucous applause of all these little Hulksters in Sturgis, because they are loving the outcome to this. Also, how fucked up is that for the Giant? So once he's not part of the Dungeon of Doom anymore, now he can't survive falls off of Cobo Hall, he can't no-sell, a shot to the head from Jimmy Hart's megaphone, and he is going to be down, by the way, for the next 7.5 to 8 minutes while this show continues to be on the air. So while he is down, knocked out, you've got the nWo celebrating in the ring. Out comes Brother Brutai, the booty man, wearing an nWo t-shirt, and he's got some Hogan cake. Is the booty man the fourth man? Has he jumped ship to the New World Order? You have Hogan with the mic saying, yo, 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 the nWo is the way to go. The booty man congratulates Hogan on regaining the title. He calls him his best friend of 22 years. And then Hogan gives him like the mafia kiss of death, the kiss on the both cheeks. And he says, you know, it's great that you're wearing the nWo shirt, dude. But here's the thing. The reason the nWo is going to beat WCW is because we don't mix business with friendship and pleasure, dude. He goes, Ric Flair, you showed you have a soft spot for Arn Anderson. Well, look at my best friend here. Let's get him, boys. And so we get this nWo beatdown of Brother Brutai. And once again, the fans pretty apathetic to this, as still the Giant sleeps in the middle of the ring. And Hulk Hogan says, if I'm going to do that to my best friend, imagine what I'm going to do to you, Ric Flair, at Clash of the Champions, you know, later this week in Denver, brother. And then this iconic moment where then the black spray paint comes out. It was wrapped up and like hidden in the cake for a while, but he unwraps the spray paint. He defaces the WCW Championship with the nWo letters. It's a really good thing he didn't fuck it up on the first try, but he nails it and he looks it right in the, shoves it in the camera's lens, nWo. And man, what a dark moment this is, as the Giant remains K'd the F.O. and this show goes off the air. I'm going to give it a half star out of 5. Oy vey, this match sucked. You know, Hogan does not yet know how to work like a heel, and the Giant yet does not know how to wrestle like a giant. I cannot believe the amount that he was giving to Hogan in this one. How human they made him in this matchup, where like the last thing you want to do is make him look weak. You want him to look strong and make it look like, oh gosh, Hollywood Hogan is so weak and pathetic. But no, you can't have Hogan selling forever in a matchup. And I get him winning dirty. That makes sense. But the whole structure of the match leading up to this was so painful, so annoying. I feel like Sturgis was both the best and the worst place to have a storyline beat like this happen, because on the one hand, the nWo is so, you know, counterculture, anti-tradition. And what's more counterculture for a wrestling show than to hold it in the middle of a biker rally surrounded by a non-traditional wrestling audience? And so for Hogan to win in what's kind of a home turf scenario, which explains why the crowd's cheering for him, like, I think that was very appropriate. I mean, this is more effectively an nWo pay-per-view than I think Sold Out, for instance, or it's a better one at least. But that's also the drawback, is that this is not the crowd you're kind of hoping for a moment like this, where Hogan, you know, completes his mission, wins the championship. That's a dark day in WCW history, and it's being met with a bunch of loud and happy cheers from this crowd that doesn't quite follow the show or anything. And so I think that makes the moment itself kind of suffer as a result. But like I said, we do get that iconic spray paint moment, so kind of makes up for that, and the really shitty match. And if you want to find out where the New World Order go from here in the short term, you can go back and watch my older review of Fall Brawl 1996. And with that said, my grade for the first ever HOG/Road Wild event in WCW history is a C+. And as is tradition, you know, the mid-card does a really good job kind of elevating the status of the show, but the main event scene and also some of the more questionable booking decisions in said mid and lower card kind of cancel it out, I would say. I mean, the Benoit Malenko match kicked all kinds of ass. Flair and Guerrero was good. I think the crowd, for good and for bad, kept the show really interesting throughout. You know, there were good things in this show, but I think the things that were bad really stuck out or would otherwise really put a damper on otherwise good matches. But what did you think of HOG Wild 96, this latest chapter in the nWo storyline? And how about this review? Let me know in the comments section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, hit that bell icon to get all the notifications. Next time here on the Classic Review, we are going to jump oh so slightly ahead in the wrestling timeline line, and we are going back to the land of extreme for ECW Hardcore Heaven 97. Taz takes on Chris Candido. Tommy Dreamer defends the honor of ECW against invading Jerry Lawler, and a three-way dance for the ECW title between Shane Douglas, Terry Funk, and Sabu. So if you like my impressions, you're going to be hearing a few of them in that review. That's happening 2 weeks from now. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.